I first heard about Diane back in 1992, 93. I just stepped in as the manager of the Greenpeace Toxics campaign in Washington, D.C., and one of my colleagues had a family emergency. And she said, could you pick up a few pieces of my work? I was like, sure. So she says, there's this woman, this shrimper in Texas, who wants to sink her boat in front of the Formosa outfall pipe. So you're going to have to help her drain the fluids out of her boat and sink her boat as a way of protesting the impact of persistent bioaccumulative toxins and plastics on her fishing grounds. You were fishing at the time for shrimp, red drum, and probably a whole bunch of other things. And I remember reading the press release and thinking, wow, okay, I'll do whatever I can. Unfortunately, you didn't get a chance to do that. The Coast Guard ended up stopping the process, but it didn't stop Diane's conviction to continue doing the work that was necessary to not only protect her own fishing grounds, but to stand in solidarity with others who were fighting for their fishing grounds, for their communities, for their health, for their well-being, not only of those of us who walk on 2 feet, but anything that swims or anything that walks this planet. And she's been a source of inspiration for me. She's been a source of courage for me. And no wonder they've called you, or you called. I don't know how the moniker Unreasonable Woman came about, but some people use that as a way to say, you're unreasonable. It's kind of like you're radical. Well, being unreasonable in the face of injustice is exactly what we need to do, as much as we need to be radical in a way that gets to the roots of the problem. So I've really appreciated your courage to stand up for everything that you have, in solidarity with the people of Bhopal, where I remember one of the stories was on the 10th anniversary of the Bhopal disaster, Diane fasted in solidarity with the victims of the Bhopal chemical disaster, sitting in the back of her truck in the heat of Texas in the summer, fasting for 40 plus days, and then on the 44th day, I think it was, walks out of her truck, walks through the facility, climbs the smokestack, and hangs a banner, all by herself. So this is the kind of courage that you've brought to this work, that you've given me, and I hope that I'm passing a little bit of it off to the people who I have the pleasure of working with. So please give a round of applause to my friend Diane Wilson, truly an unreasonable woman.
Well, first of all, I want to tell you how much I appreciate y'all letting me come here and speak tonight. And I love it that the theme is radical action. I just love it. I think that's been my theme for almost 37 years now. And the thing of it is so amazing that when it comes to protecting your home, drawing the line and saying no more, that's considered radical and it's considered unreasonable, and I have been called crazy so many times that I kind of almost welcome it. I always tell people when they want to be introduced to me, I'm like, well, I've been called crazy for a very long time. But anyway, I'm gonna show you where that passion comes from, because it is a passion. And all right, I'm gonna work this little thing here. This is my home base. These are my bays. I'm from the mid-Texas Gulf, and we're around Blackjack Island, Matagorda Bay, Lavaca Bay, Spirit Center, San Antonio Bay, Mesquite Bay, Copano Bay, and so that is my home. We have a county, it's a tiny rural county, but we are surrounded by bays, and I'm a fourth generation fisherwoman, and my family has been there probably 120 years. So yes, it's a sense of place. It really, really is. I didn't realize that was the word for it, but I had a lawyer one time who was representing me, and he said, to explain myself to me, is like, you got a sense of place. And yes, I do. And anyway, this is, believe it or not, it's probably around 1910, and it's one of the boats in San Antonio Bay, and it's oyster boats with sails. And that old man on the right over there, that's my Grandpa B. And I had a great grandpa who started it all on Blackjack Island, but that fella kind of skedaddled and we haven't found him yet. And anyway, and the fish house that's what the fish houses look like back in the day. And as you notice, those are nets hanging there. And there are wooden corks that were handmade, and that's the way it started down there. This is more of it. Pretty soon you start getting dredges coming in, so some of the boats start coming in, and so they can get further out into the bays. And believe it or not, our little fishing community of Seadrift, Texas, population 900 right now, but it had a railroad clean out on a pier out in the middle of the bay, and that's where they were loading produce, seafood. And as you'll see, that upper picture up there, that's a fleet of sailboats. And believe it or not, this area around 1930 had more shrimp exported from this bay than any place in the United States. So it shows you the potential that has been here. And this is just to give you an idea of what little bay boats in the beginning they look like. And this is when I was a girl, when I was like 5 and 6 years old, these were the size of the boats. These were bay boats. And you can see they were, had wooden mast poles. And you can see that one guy, and it was most of them, it's all single captains, extremely independent, as I think that's the key word for fishermen, is highly independent. And then there were the deckhands. And this, of course, is the things that kept demolishing our community. We had hurricanes in 1919, hurricanes in 1942, cholera in 1963. And as you see the shrimp boats there, I always wondered where, in other parts of the coast, where the shrimpers go to hide their boats from the storm. But that was a place, that was the lineup of the shrimp boats trying to get out of Hurricane Carla in 1963. And this is just another day-to-day scenes in my community where I grew up. And when you have an authentic fishing village, and everybody made their living on the bay, whether they were shrimpers, where they were fin fishermen, where they were, in those days we didn't have trot lines because it was still legal to have gill nets. And we also had oystermen. And as you can see in that top corner right there, that's the Froggy Shrimp Company. And matter of fact, when I was like 40 years old, that's where I started running it because shrimping got pretty bad. And that's me down below, and behind me is my shrimp boat, the CB. And as you can see, I didn't have many shrimp in the basket there, and that's why I had that look on my face. But anyway, but it was a great place, and it had the heart and the soul of the community was on the bay, on those boats, and in those fish houses. And so that's where you start developing a sense of identity of who you are. You know, I've been an environmental activist probably, I think 37 years. I've been a fisherman longer because I've been on a boat since I was 8 years old. But the thing of it is, the thing that gave me a vision, a sense of identity, is when I was like 5 years old and my dad was a fisherman, my brothers were shrimpers, and my grandfather was a was a fin fisherman too, and you would go down to the bay when all the boats were coming in. And when I was a little girl and going down there, it's like there was an old woman who was there, and she was, and she never said anything, but she was silent, and she was really glad to see me. And I loved going to that bay because that old woman was there. And when I was a little bit older, I realized that old woman was the sea. I had a vision when I was that young that I have never forgot. And as you can see there, it's like, these are really good times. And as you can see, that's a 1,000-pound drag there. The guy was very proud of it. He made his wife, who was deckhand, take a picture of it. As you can see, there was one of the shrimp nets with the turtle shooters in it. And the boats were good looking. They were painted. They had been hauled out. Their engines were working. They might have even bought a brand new net that season. And that's the heart and the soul of it, is being out there. And so you see, the thing of it is, and I'm sure a lot of people on the Gulf Coast and people from Louisiana, I'm sure they're feeling a lot of it, is we, in the 50s, and it was like right after I was born, like I was born in 48. I'm 77, so I'm old as dirt, but anyway, in the 50s, these chemical plants started coming in and realizing there was the lack of regulation, the availability of cheap labor, and the ability to put your discharge into the water and use the water to travel up and down with your barges was a wonderful, wonderful idea. And so we started getting a lot of chemical plants. And the thing of it is, you might ask, and a lot of people ask me that, is like, when did I get aware that there was a problem? It's like, well, everybody knew, there was like the green tide and the brown tide and the red tide. And then all our dolphins, we had the largest dolphin die-off in the Mammal Stranding Network's history. And I remember going out there in the bay, and it looked like a quilt on the bay, and it was like dolphins that were dissolving out there on the bay. And pretty soon we had all of these scientists, and we had fishermen, shrimpers, that were bringing in dolphins on their decks. And really, in the beginning, shrimpers were afraid to bring the dolphins in on their deck because they were afraid they were going to be accused of killing the dolphins. And so there has always been that kind of issue going on with fishermen and regulations and game wardens. And anyway, but when I was working at the fish house, I had a shrimper. He had about 4 different types of cancers. He had big lumps all over his arm, and he was too sick to be out shrimping. So he brought me this newspaper article, and I still remember the date. It was 1989. I just turned 40 years old, and it was the toxic release inventory. And I don't know how many of y'all know what the toxic release inventory is about, but it's the first time industry in the United States had to report what was going into the air, what were they putting in the water, what were they ejecting into the ground, what were they trucking through your communities, what were they putting on the barges. And my little county, the whole county, I bet you wouldn't, 16,000 people, we were #1 in the nation for toxic disposal to the land. And that just, that just kind of blew me out of the fish house that day. I mean, like, how on earth could you be #1 in the nation? And probably if we were #1 in the nation, I imagine we were ranking pretty high in the world. So I did something totally out of nature. And this is key, folks, totally out of my nature, because I'm an introvert. I really am. I like the solitude of a boat. I don't like to be bothered. I don't like to talk. I don't know how she got me up here, but here I am. And anyway, but the thing of it is, I did something I didn't think I was capable of. But I was pretty outraged about being that high on toxic pollution and never being told about it, never hearing about it. And so I walked down to the city hall. I had that little article, shows you how innocent I was. I had that little article and said, I want a meeting and I want to talk about that. And so she just wrote it all down. Sure, Diane. And by the next day, that lady was down at the fish house in the docks, and you don't get people with fancy clothes, nice dresses, heels, coming down the fish house. And there she was, and she was like, Diane, you got to get this out. You got to not do this. It's just like red flags, red flags. And the thing of it is, and then the next day, I had the bank president. Never talked to that guy a day of my life, and there he was in a 3-piece suit. And he said, Diane, are you starting a vigilante group fixing to roast the industry alive? And I'm like, oh. I hadn't even had the meeting, and already the word was getting around that I was a vigilante, that I was trouble. I even had people calling my brothers who were shrimpers, who could not care less what I was doing. And they called them and said, stop your sister or whatever she's doing, just stop it. And the thing of it is, that pretty much in my community has been the attitude for 37 years, to simply want questions, stop the pollution, and enforce it. And as you all know, with you all here, is that there is a battle out there. There are forces out there, and they are out in one way or another, and it will start impacting you, your bays, your ocean, your community, your family, your kids, yourself. And we, like in my community, with all of this around, it's like the only time the newspapers started talking, it's like, oh, let me see. All right, yeah, poor fading fishermen. They started doing articles about the poor fading fishermen because their way of life was being destroyed. Matter of fact, in my community, things were starting to get bad. They actually bulldozed 5 fish houses in my community. So if a shrimper went out on the bay, where could he come in and sell his catch? He would have to put them in his truck and go sit out on the highway. That's the way he sold the shrimp. And it's not much different now. Matter of fact, a man just 2 weeks ago, he caught a large amount of shrimp, just like, was crazy. He caught some shrimp, but he couldn't sell them. There was no place to sell them to. So he goes on the internet, who wants shrimp, sits on the side of the road. And that's our community. And, and like I said, you start seeing the dredging. They want more oil export terminals. And already we have industry down there. Not only were we #1, then we had a plastic plant, Formosa, who said, plastic? Oh my God, the plastic, they love the plastic. And we've got a mercury Superfund in the middle of it. So every time they want to dredge it so they can get these big ships in, it stirs up the mercury. And anyway, And so naturally, I got a little bit more radical. And so she gave a couple of my bigger ones, and sinking the boat. When you have a fish, a vision, and when it is either your way of life that you're saving or just give it up, because most people say, it's over with, you're at the end of the parade, it's done deal, sweetheart deal. You're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to do anything, and especially since I was a fisherwoman, that was one strike against me. Two, I was a woman. They didn't like that either. And so the thing of it is, you would have to finally resort to actions, one that expressed your outrage, but another is to bring attention to it, because the local newspapers would not print me. So I started doing, I think my first action really was a hunger strike. I didn't know the first thing about a hunger strike. You don't go eating, I figured. And believe it or not, my first one was on a shrimp boat in Matagorda Bay, and this was before phones, cell phones. And so nobody knew I was on the hunger strike except the company. And regularly, here they would come and climb on that boat where I was out, and this upper management, he would bring down these engineers in their suits, and he'd look at me and he said, look at her, isn't she stupid? He said, Diane, you're shooting yourself in the foot. And then he'd say, oh, please, Diane, get off this hunger strike. Get off the hunger strike. And the thing of it is the hunger strikes, they could not control. They had lawyers for permits, for lawsuits, for negotiation, but they cannot control someone who is on a hunger strike. And so, believe it or not, and this is something I learned, within 2 weeks of a hunger strike with no money, no support, I got exactly what I wanted. And that's when I realized the power behind civil disobedience, where it's like from the heart and committed. And so, anyway, I've done a bunch of those. Believe it or not, I have actually did 13 hunger strikes. I really have. And so anyway, yeah, so what you see is I started, a lot of the times I just did it by myself because people are scared. And in a community when there's bigger forces, more money, more political strength, they're afraid, you know, and especially if some of the people are working at the chemical plant, because believe it or not, shrimping got so bad that 2 of my brothers sold their boats and started working for the company. And it's hard times. So for a long time, I had to do a lot of the actions by myself. And that's where I think it was really important that I was kind of a solitary person, because when you're used to being by yourself, it doesn't bother you as much that you don't have people. But the thing where things started to change is when I started getting help from workers inside the plant. Because if you've been there long enough, and I was there 37 years, so they began to know I was there, and I may be a little bit crazy, but at least they trusted that I was doing what I said. So I started getting workers in the plant who started giving me all of this information, and that's when I found out what was really going on. And one of the things that Formosa Plastic was doing is they were putting out all of this plastic. I think some people, they call it nurdles. The workers in the plant, it was called pellets, and it was powder. polyvinyl chloride, specialized polyvinyl chloride, polypropylene, polyethylene. I've become a real chemical expert on these kind of things. But the main thing is me and a couple workers, believe it or not, workers from the plant, we started going out on the bay, walking along the shore, looking in the marshes. I got a kayak. I found out every one of their stormwater outfalls. That's where the pellets and the powder comes from the plants. And let's see. I think I need to, oh yeah, here it is. Okay, I ended up, we did it for almost 3 years. Nearly every day, I went out in a kayak. I tracked down their outfalls. I took pictures. I took over 8,000 photographs, collected over 2,500 samples, and I, believe it or not, you know who my lawyer was? Legal aid. If you got no money, you go to legal aid. If you need a divorce or you need help with rental or whatever, you can go to legal aid if you don't have any money. And legal aid was my lawyer. And we took Formosa Plastics to court with that evidence, 2,500 samples. I think you see the sideways picture there. I've got them all in these plastic bins, and we found a goat cart. I hauled it to court. And that was our evidence. And believe it or not, we won it. And matter of fact, we not only won it, we got zero discharge of plastic, the only place in the country. And we also got a $50 million settlement from Formosa Plastic. And that is the largest in the clean water history in the United States. And the thing of it is one reason why I'm here tonight to talk about it is let's see, wait a minute, hang on. There we are. We put $20 million into a Matagorda Bay Fishery Cooperative. Is the Federation here? Southern Cooperative?
The Federation? The Federation.
Good, good, because we gave the Federation $20 million to come down and teach these fishermen how to form a cooperative. And if you talk to Terrence, who did it, he had long braids down to here, and I was like, to see that man in our fishery meetings, it was like, viva la revolution. I was like, wow. It was amazing. And only Terrence knows how difficult in our communities to bring people together to form this cooperative. Because quite frankly, I can remember years ago when they were talking about, every once in a while, someone kind of wild and kind of crazy-eyed, they'd bring up a cooperative, and they were like, oh, communism, socialism, let's climb through the window, you don't dare go there. And it's like, here they were talking cooperation and having this outside federation come in to teach these fishermen. And the bulk of them were Hispanic fishermen. And some of them didn't even speak English. And so it is now, as you can see the people that showed up. It was an amazing feat to get them all there, to get them to listen to it took years. It took years to bring them together, but they are now officially a Matagorda Bay Fishery Cooperative. They got are putting the largest oyster farm in the entire Gulf of Mexico. And it is something to be extremely proud of. That is one of the most important things that I think came out of it, because to me, and this is my vision, it will bring back the communities, because you get fishermen where they can work again, you bring back fish houses, you bring back the diesel mechanics, you bring back fish nets and marine supplies and welding and you know, and like right now, my community is pretty much dead. It really is. But I see a vision. I really do. And I believe we all have the capability to do this. It's like I am absolutely nobody special at all. But the thing of it is when you have a commitment and you say no, and being a little radical, I totally believe we're way too well behaved. And the reason why actually I think I'm called unreasonable, it was a quote, it's a misquote by George Bernard Shaw, and he said, reasonable men adapt to the world, but an unreasonable man makes the world adapt to him, and that's where progress begins. And I just put a little woman on it there because I totally believe that that's what it takes. And thank you.